Now, all of this rain is starting to impact critical systems.
New tonight, raw sewage flowing into Clam Bayou. It happened last August and it's happening now. St. Pete Mayor Rick Kreisman is dodging questions about what's going on. 10 Investigates Mike Deason, who first uncovered the sewage dump last year, is here with a story that you'll see only on 10. Mike?
Well, Reg and Dion, you may recall last August, after we discovered the city was dumping raw sewage into Clam Bayou in Gulfport, the mayor promised it would never happen again. And that could be why he is reluctant to admit what his own public works director told us about this environmental problem.
You're looking at raw sewage from St. Petersburg overflowing from the manholes in the area around Clam Bayou in Gulfport. Is there any raw sewage that's going into Clam Bayou?
There appears to have been some that went in right over there.
Claude Tankersley is St. Petersburg's new public works director. Before you were here, the mayor said that we wouldn't have raw sewage going into Clam Bayou.
We had an extremely unusual event that happened yesterday.
But despite the fact the area around the bayou is being roped off and signs are warning the surface is contaminated, St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman had nothing to say to upset people in Gulfport.
Upset in Gulfport about
The raw sewage in Clam Bayou.
well, there isn't. My understanding is that's not an issue for this go round.
And then the mayor's staff stepped in.
That's not what he said.
That's exactly. Wait a second, Kevin. Let me ask. Get
That's
a
not.
quick comment.
That's not what he said.
Wait, let me get a quick comment from the mayor, and then. So your understanding is that there's not raw sewage going in.
I think Claude answered the question.
So we turned to Tankersley and asked him to repeat what he said in earshot of the mayor, and that there could be raw sewage in Clam Bayou. Did you not say that?
Mike, stop this baiting stuff. You're
No,
doing.
I'm just asking you. Did you not say?
Don't we already have the answer on tape? Why don't you just use that?
So here we go. Did it get into the bayou?
We know that it got into the canal right over there. So we assume from the canal it may have gotten into the bayou.
Sources in the water department say the problem each time, last year and this, is because the elimination of one of the water treatment plants. A few years ago, the city decided to go from 4 to 3 in order to save millions of dollars.
Raw sewage spilling into a bayou, and the outrage is spreading, while local officials refuse to back the mayor.
10 News at 6 starts right now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Reginald Roundtree.
And I'm Dion Lim. Right away, the outrage continues tonight over the way the City of St. Pete handled the situation. The city's water treatment plants could not handle all the sewage following the rain dumped by Tropical Storm Colin. That, in turn, resulted in a system overload and sewage coming out of the manhole. 10 Investigates Mike Deason first broke this story for you last night. He joins us now in the newsroom. And Mikey, I understand some elected officials are pretty upset tonight.
That's true, Dion. Officials in both St. Petersburg and Gulfport, where Clam Bayou is located, say the situation wasn't handled well. While Tuesday's problem was mechanical and not as onerous as last August when St. Pete dumped the sewage into the bayou, many are not happy. The discharge of St. Petersburg raw sewage from a manhole into Clam Bayou is causing a major stink in the city of Gulfport.
They said that never again will they discharge into Clam Bayou.
Gulfport City Council member Yolanda Roman is irate that St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman denies what his public works director admits: raw sewage was discharged.
My understanding is that's not an issue for this go round.
Is there any raw sewage that's going into Clam Bayou?
There appears to have been some that went in right over there.
And Roman is also irritated St. Pete officials didn't contact Gulfport.
Do I sound a little angry? Perhaps, because I should not find out about what happened yesterday in the city of Gulfport through your news crew. That was how I find out.
But St. Pete City Council member Carl Nurse says there seems to be some sort of reluctance by the mayor and his administration to be honest with the public, whether it comes to the problems here at Clam Bayou or the fix necessary for the aging and inadequate sewer system.
I think the public can see the truth and can handle the truth.
Nurse says the city needs to spend $100 million to fix the system, and he believes the $6 million from the BP oil settlement is better spent on sewers than the mayor's feel-good projects.
The sewer system cries out that we have to get started in a bigger way fast.
Many in Gulfport agree.
This is the first storm of 2016, a short-term storm. And look what happened. Tell me what happens if we have a 10-day rain event.
Now, in addition to the Clam Bayou problem, the city did dump thousands of partially treated sewage water gallons from the Albert Whitted plant into Tampa Bay. But do remember, they did have a permit allowing something like this in an emergency, the type of emergency the city experienced this week.
Sewage release after sewage released into the bay. Is St. Petersburg equipped to handle a storm? One lawmaker calls out the city of St. Pete, pushing for an investigation.
Sewage in the water. Our 10 investigation continues into the spill into Clam Bayou. Tonight, officials are calling for action. Since Monday's storm, the city has dumped 12 Olympic-sized swimming pools of partially treated sewage right into Tampa Bay.
Now that's in addition to the raw sewage spilled into Clam Bayou. Now 10 Investigates Mike Deason, who uncovered the spill, found out a state representative is calling for an investigation into St. Petersburg. Mike?
Well, Reg, in court, State Representative Kathleen Peters is suspicious that St. Petersburg has not kept up with the growth in the area and that not enough has been done to expand the sewer system in St. Pete. Peters believes the DEP investigation will show because of the lack of sewer facility and water treatment expansion, the problems this week and the past years were inevitable.
57,000 gallons of raw sewage in Clam Bayou. 8.5 million gallons of partially treated sewage dumped into Tampa Bay. 15 million gallons of raw sewage dumped into Clam Bayou in August of 2015.
That's why we're contacting the secretary. Exactly why.
Pinellas Representative Kathleen Peters says in this letter to DEP Secretary John Steverson, she's convinced St. Petersburg's perceived inaction on the issue has made for a potential environmental and health disaster.
I have grave concerns that they have not expanded the infrastructure to meet the growth and development that's happened in Pinellas County.
But the city is saying it was hit with an unusually heavy rain event in Collin and that the partially treated sewage coming out of the Albert Whitted treatment plant has much less what's called fecal chloroform than raw sewage does. And to put this in perspective, 9 teaspoons of fecal coliform would close this city pool. And what the city of St. Petersburg is doing with the treated sewage is putting the equivalent of 2 one-gallon jugs of human waste into this pool. And that's something most people would never dream of taking a dip in.
It's kind of sad, but I'm sure hopefully it will clear up.
But for now, warning signs are along the waterfront, and St. Pete Councilmember Carl Nurse says the problem has been years in the making.
They are, a long string of administrations that has tried to kick the can down the road, but there's no more road left. This is the time where we have to face this music.
Nurse says it will cost a minimum of $100 million and 10 years to fix the aging sewer treatment system. Meantime, the city of St. Petersburg didn't comment on the call for the investigation, saying only it has been in constant contact with the DEP. And it says if Peters can come up with a way to help fund the project in the legislature, they will be happy to try to improve the system.
Letter arrived at St. Petersburg City Hall at 6:07 this morning. That letter is from a whistleblower who says there were warnings about flooding and sewage spills. Now 10 Investigates Mike Deason has been looking at the whistleblower's claims, and Mike, tell us all about it.
Well, Reg, this 11-page letter and copies of the emails and other documents say the city was warned that sewage overflows would happen if it didn't follow the recommendations of a consultant before shutting down the Albert Whitted treatment plant. But it ignored the recommendations. The consultant said to avoid overflows, it was mandatory the capacity at the Southwest treatment plant be expanded by almost 1/3 before the city closed Albert Whitted. But that expansion never happened.
The evidence indicates that they knew.
Former St. Petersburg Mayor Bill Foster points to the consultant's study in 2014 that warned that the Whitted plant could not be closed unless there was a massive expansion of the Southwest plant. However, the letter points out the city shut down Albert Whitted without making recommended upgrades.
They knew that if we had a high storm event that we were going to have these discharges, and they elected to decommission it anyway.
The whistleblower letter is from the chief plant operator at the Northwest Treatment Plant. He was on the job all day and we couldn't reach him for comment. But his letter states public safety and the environment could possibly be in danger due to the sewage spills.
I think people also wanted to we're really excited about having waterfront acres downtown, and so excited that they led right into this sewage crisis.
Councilmember Steve Cornell opposed closing the plant. He says the city blew it. And he adds the mayor is not being candid by saying the sewage dumped into the bay is clean.
So we're using some terms and saying it's almost reclaimed, it's reclaimed, that when you look at the DEP standards, they don't match. And that's a real problem for me. The city should not be in the business of being vague and misleading people.
Meantime, Foster rejects the administration's argument that the rains this summer were the perfect storm for a disaster.
They haven't had a perfect storm yet. Baker had 3 hurricanes. I had high water events in 2012, 2013, which led us to know that you can't decommission Whitted until you expand and complete Southwest. So they did it anyway.
Now, a city spokesman says because this is a whistleblower letter, the city can't comment. Meantime, the Florida Department of Regulations is preparing a consent order to try to force the city to correct the problem. That should be done early next week.
Bombshell developments in the St. Petersburg sewage crisis. 2 top water officials are suspended. The governor has ordered a DEP investigation, and sources are telling 10 Investigates Mike Deason there could be a criminal investigation. Mike is here to bring us up to speed. Mike?
Well, Reg, you may recall we first told you about this consultant report last Friday. It holds a major key to the sewage crisis, and is the reason St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman suspended the 2 top officials today. The 2 were apparently aware that the consultant report said don't close Albert Whitted treatment plant until the treatment capacity was expanded elsewhere. And St. Pete Mayor Rick Kreisman maintains he was never informed. The consultant says the sewage dumps and spills likely never would have happened if the Whitted plant closure had been delayed. 10 Investigates has obtained paperwork showing Engineering and Capital Improvements Director Thomas Gibson and Water Resources Director Steve Levitt were aware of the report. That's why the mayor suspended them today. However, State Rep Kathleen Peters says that does not absolve the mayor.
And the bottom line is the buck stops at the leadership. You know, you can blame all kinds of things, but you got to take ownership. He needs to apologize to the citizens, and he needs to take ownership. He's the administrator of that city, and he should know what's going on.
We tried contacting the 2 water officials. Gibson wasn't home, and his wife angrily said not to come back. Levitt didn't answer the several calls we made to his office and home. Meantime, U.S. Congressman David Jolly is offering protection for any more Water Department whistleblowers that come forth like Craven Askew. He says the feds should step in.
This certainly rises to the level of an EPA investigation in terms of the environmental impact, but likely an investigation that goes much beyond that as well.
And while Jolly hints at a criminal investigation, sources say Florida Fish and Wildlife is taking a hard look at sewage dumping and spills to see if laws were broken. Meantime, Peters says she expects the investigation the governor ordered could dig up more answers.
They're going to dig a little bit deeper into this, and I think they're prepared to dig as far as they possibly can.
Now, I tried to talk with Mayor Kreisman today. His office told me he was unavailable for comment today, but he is planning to address the issue Thursday afternoon at the city council meeting. Meantime, the mayor's spokesman, Ben Kirby, issued a statement saying the DEP investigation is politically motivated.